And Turkey's efforts to join the European Union after a 3-year stalemate may have hit another roadblock. Germany has proposed delaying a new round of EU membership talks with Turkey, which were due to take place on Wednesday, partly because of its handling of the anti-government protests that have swept through the country in the past few weeks. And joining us now from Washington, D.C. with a closer look at this developing story is Tyson, the Director of Transatlantic Relations at the Bertelsmann Foundation. Tyson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for
having me. We're going to get straight into it. Thank you. How likely is it that Wednesday's meeting will be postponed or canceled? And what kind of political backlash will this create between Turkey and the EU?
I think that the likelihood that the negotiations are postponed is very high. Basically, what has been happening over the weekend is a little bit of diplomatic volley rhetorically back and forth between the German and the Turkish government, which has led to a hardening of positions around Germany to suspend the negotiations. Austria and the Netherlands are both supporting Germany in this, and it looks very likely at this point. Now, the Turks have threatened to suspend their EU accession talks completely, which would be very damaging to the process. And what has emerged is a kind of compromise position in the meantime, whereby the opening of a new chapter in negotiations would still occur, but actual talks for negotiations would take place in October. That's after the German elections take place on September 22nd.
Well, it hasn't just been a question of Germany under Merkel. I mean, Merkel has said earlier this week that she was, quote, appalled at the very tough response by Prime Minister Erdogan in ordering riot police to clear Istanbul of thousands of protesters. But Germany has long been opposed to Turkey entering the EU. Why such strong opposition?
Well, Germany, actually, the picture is very mixed. The only party that actually opposes outright Turkish membership in the EU is Merkel's party, and she reiterated that over the weekend at the party convention, where the party platform of the CDU, the Christian Democrats, Merkel's party, openly opposed the membership of Turkey in the EU and actually suspended the idea of a privileged partnership with the EU. Merkel said, look, the Turks are not interested in this, so why should we pursue this any further? But every other party, including a small party, the FDP, which includes the German foreign minister, do support Turkish membership in the EU. Now, the Germans have a very complex... Oh, sorry.
But if they do support it, I mean, keep in mind, Turkey opened negotiations to join the EU 8 years ago, the same time as Croatia. Croatia actually joins next week as a 28th member, and not so much for Turkey. And Turkey has actually taken to warning that the EU needs Turkey more than it needs Europe. Do you think there's any merit to that statement?
I think that they have a very symbiotic relationship. Both need each other equally. And I think it's very damaging for people like Egemen Baş, the lead negotiator on the Turkish side, to say that the EU needs Turkey more than Turkey needs the EU. Look, the EU accession process and the prospect of accession has been one of the driving factors of reform in Turkey for the past 7 years. It's basically what prevented a coup from taking place in 2007. It's what allowed Erdogan's government to rule for the length of time that it has, and has really been one of the drivers of the economic growth that we've seen over the past 10 years. So I don't think it's fair for Turkey to say that they don't need the EU. I think it's a symbiotic relationship.
Well, the EU is in a bit of a fragile position at the moment. Would it be to their advantage to have Turkey and its growing economy, especially considering Turkey is a strong force in the Middle East, as part of the EU at this stage?
Well, there's no question that the Turkish model has been one of the beacons of reform for many of the countries emerging from the Arab uprising in the past, since 2011. That said, Turkey is still a large economy. The demographics are growing. It's a country of 74 million and will grow to surpass Germany to be the largest country in Europe in the next 5 years. It's also a very poor economy. The GDP per capita is the lowest, would be the lowest in the EU by far. So absorbing Turkey within the EU will be an extremely difficult process. There's money that needs to be shifted. And right now, we all see that the EU is going through some integration fatigue, if you will. So there's still some integration pangs that need to be worked out within the EU currently without absorbing a new member, which would be its largest member.
Right. A lot of issues to be resolved there. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Tyson, Director of Transatlantic Relations at the Bertelsmann Foundation.